the statement was, we've changed the wrap to the handle, we've changed, the blade, we've changed this over time, this and that over time, but isn't it not still the same axe that, my family has owned for generations?
Hello and welcome to another Damn Anime podcast. My name is Nick and I'll be your host. And here with me tonight is my good buddy Joe. Joe, how you doing?
Doing all right, man. Yeah, long time no see. For
Yep,
all those who
it's,
don't know, it's a joke because we literally, at the last 2 days, recorded two different other podcasts.
it's 3 days in a row. 3 days in a row of the old podcast grind. But we are here tonight to talk about Nier episode 7. Questionable actions is the current episode. So yeah, let's go ahead and jump right into it. So the episode begins with Adam and Eve sitting at the table once again, and I mean, I didn't pick up too much to really talk about from here, except that Adam gets up and goes off to do something, and he tells Eve to stay there and to read. And Eve is seems like he's eagerly awaiting his brother's return. But Adam has gone off. So my thinking is that Adam is going to do something important, and wherein he might I don't know, run into our main characters, but that just remains to be
Yep.
seen.
So you end up seeing Adam being more, fully dressed, wearing glasses now, fancy shirt. Eve is kind of much like we left him last time with just the pants and the arm gauntlet plus tattoo. He corrects himself while trying to address his brother. He does use the formal san. So
He's
he
learning.
catches himself mid sentence. Yeah. So he's very much that way. And he just doesn't understand the philosophy that, he's just simple minded in a sense. So he's like, I don't understand what you're talking about. Can we play? And he's like, you stay and read. And he's like, I don't want to. And he's like, okay, fine. It's like, you stay here and you don't leave, we'll play. And he's like, all right, yeah, it's a promise. We'll, yasoku. So, but when the moment, since Adam already left, he says out loud to himself, though, he calls him Chan again. So no matter, he still has that mentality, I guess.
Yeah, so he just doesn't really understand what his brother's asking him to do. So this seems to be them reminding us that Adam and Eve are still there. They're kind of the main antagonists for the story. So they just want us to know, okay, they're still there. We haven't forgotten about them, and they're going to be important later, I think. So after that, we get the main theme for the show, and then it jumps in basically to 2B and 9S along with their pods are sitting on a broken bridge overlooking a field, and 9S comments about how the deer in the field spend so much time eating, and he says that, sorry, what?
They're moose.
They're moose. Okay. Does he say moose?
Yeah,
Okay.
at least that's the translation I read. But they're moose. Yeah, but it's literally the most wasted time of an episode just talking about random animals.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Yeah, it is moose in the game. Yeah. So anyway, he talks about how the moose spend so much time eating, and says that humans did something similar, eating 3 meals a day, which is kind of like, well, I mean, these moose would spend about half of their day eating. Humans, 3 meals, you could eat everything that you need for the day in like 15 minutes. So it's a little bit
but he was
different.
saying how inefficient the moose were and how inefficient humans were.
Yeah.
That was what he's getting to. It's
I
just like,
just take
yeah,
umbrage with it because I mean, I guess if you include all the time that we spend cooking the food and preparing the food, it is a good bit of your day. But like compared to animals, humans are way, way, way more efficient in terms of food. But I get what he's saying. Humans are still like this sort of imperfect animal that has to do all these things just to stay alive. Whereas androids, they're like they just run around. I guess they're solar powered or whatever. Their source of energy sort of just seems to last forever. Yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah, shortly after this, they bring up the Adam and Eve again, essentially as the variants, just to drive in more that hey, we haven't forgotten about them. They still exist, and they're figuring something's. Or at least 9S is talking about there's something fishy with Command. He's suspecting that they're hiding stuff. It's taking them too long to process the data, and why haven't they said anything else? While Tubi's like, "Yep, that just means they're dangerous," and trying to more or less just like brush it off, like, "Yeah, okay." It's like whether it's out of uh, just not caring, or
yeah.
if it's just like maybe you shouldn't stick your nose in where it doesn't belong. Um, it's not. It's like above our pay grade, so we don't have to worry about it. It could be any number of those reasons.
Yeah,
Uh,
and then they get that call from command. That one girl starts talking to
Operator
them.
60.
Operator 60 starts talking to them about hairpins and something like that. And
Yeah, she
2B is
talks
not
about that
having it.
the silly that not the lily, but what do they call it? The moon tier or something like that?
Oh, I forgot. Yeah, they did talk about
Um,
the Mentir.
yeah, lunar tier. That was it. It was the lunar
That's right,
tier.
Lunatir.
Um, yeah, it's like, yeah, it'll be a great accessory for you. Like, it was the first time you've seen an operator with a personality
Yeah,
for the most part. And it's just very strange that out of the blue, it's just like, um, she's like, it looked good on YouTube. And I'm like, are you a fangirl? Because it's really strange. It's like, I don't know.
yeah.
She gets
2B
to talk to some.
is not having it. She's like, we don't need that." So it's a little bit of light humor, but they definitely introduced the lunar tier. Lily flower that seems to be uh, that seems to run through Nier and Drakengard lore. It pops up here and there, so it's like okay, that's going to be going on, I guess, in the background. So we'll just keep an eye on that. But soon after that, Pascal and the big sister appear, and the big sister seems to be distraught. Apparently, the little sister, which is actually the larger robot, but the little sister went missing to look for a broken part to replace on the big sister, and they think she went to the Forest Kingdom because that's where these kind of parts can be found. And Pascal begs to be at 9S to help look for the little sister, and 9S is like, no, I don't want to do that. No, 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 no. But strangely, 2B agrees to
Yeah,
look.
that whole scene is weird though because they tried to do the most comical begging and re-asking and then being turned down and then
There, yeah,
like the big sister whines some more in a like a crybaby, the comical fashion. And then they
yeah,
ask again, they're like, Pascal's like, "Yeah, will you help?" And then it was really odd to see this kind of weird tantrum, like comedic side playing out. It felt very, I don't know, Saturday morning cartoon, I
yeah,
guess.
yeah. That, and then the hairpin stuff is all very much. They're trying to infuse a little bit of light comedy into the episode to even it out. They've been doing this pretty much with every episode. Early parts, a little bit of light comedy, and then they get into like the serious brass tacks of the rest of the episode. But it was kind of comical. The thing I thought was kind of cool and funny was when they were talking about Pascal's different body types, like or different lower half types, and
Yeah,
they
so Pascal decides to take them to the forest, and so the next scene is they're flying through the air while
oh that's it, yeah.
9S and 2B are hanging from tethers from his now he's like, he has a hovering, body essentially. He's a VTOL kind of
Yeah.
so it was and then he's just like, "Yeah, I can just do modifications on myself." And
And
so yeah,
so,
that's
yeah, so it shows like a boat and then like just different ways that he can change his lower form, and some of that stuff looked kind of cool. But
Gave him a chainsaw arm, and then he even made himself a carnival ride for the children robots.
yeah,
Um,
and so the thing comes up. Dadgummit, I can't. The ship of Theseus. The whole idea that how many parts can you replace on on a ship before it's not the same ship anymore if you replace it one piece at a time. Um, and so, you know, that idea comes up because 9S sort of challenges Pascal on the idea of changing out parts. 2B kind of brings up that aspect, and Pascal's like, well, that's kind of interesting, something worth looking into or thinking about. So just a little bit of uh, philosophy there infused for you.
yeah, so it's funny because it's actually very similar. The first time I've ever heard that scenario kind of come into play was off the Terry Pratchett series, The Night Watch. Um, and one of the later books in the series, more or less, it's a fantasy series, follows a fictitious world, and there's multiple story arcs. So different books will go following different groups of people. And so the Night Watch series is literally following the Night Watch of the town guard. And one of the guys ends up meeting like a dwarf, and the dwarf says, to the dwarf king essentially says like this is our family axe. It's been handing down for generations. And they're their question is pretty much the statement was, we've changed the wrap to the handle, we've changed the blade, we've changed this over time, this and that over time, but isn't it not still the same axe that my family has owned for generations? And so it's a matter of your mentality behind it. And so, but yeah, but bringing the question to Pascal of how much you can change, and so Pascal has to think deep about that. And it's like, and ends up coming back at like just an odd like, yeah, by the way, here's the answer to my to that question that you asked me before. um and that answer was, you can change everything, but it's the heart essentially that keeps you what you are. And
Yeah, he
that
kind of
throws
decides.
9S for a little bit of a loop, because 9S is like, that doesn't make sense because you're a machine life form, you don't have a heart. Like, do androids not have hearts? And he gets kind of a pissy look on his face for just a split second. Um, Not sure if he takes offense to the fact that, or like, if if what how he thinks about that, because obviously he has emotion. So I mean, I guess it classifies what do you consider having a heart? Because if you're taking a biology like lesson, then you're like, of course they don't have a heart, but it's like the soul or the spirit. So it's kind of an interesting answer that Pascal gives.
Right, right. So, so upon reaching the forest kingdom, they find that that its inhabitants have been killed. They find the old dead king and a memory file, and it's not like he was killed in by whatever's killing all the other inhabitants. He has like a memorial to him with two I guess servant looking machines, and one of them is holding a memory file. So so it's at that point that 9S decides to look into the memory file and sees a bit of the history of how that place came to be. Do you remember how what was found in that file?
Yeah, 256 years ago, it's the first memory jump, and it was the founding of the land. So the king, which is a larger robot or machine life form, declares independence and says, "Hey, we're gonna live together, and by making our own kingdom, like, this will be our land." And one of the machines is like, trying to figure out what does that mean, and it's like, we're going to be a family. This is just, and a kingdom is just like one big house. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. We're all for it. They're all, so that's how that kingdom got created. And then it does I believe in this one, it does a time cut here, or is it the second? No, it's later on. They do a time cut again.
Right,
So
right. So they'll do that a little bit later, but so they
yeah,
kind of show how the Forest Kingdom got its start. Um, but the androids and so we come out of that, and the androids and Pascal continue to look for the little sister. 9S falls through a hole in a bridge, but he's saved by Pascal. And whenever he's kind of saved by Pascal, he just asks why. And it kind of skips forward a little bit. It shows 9S being lowered back down safely onto the remaining parts of the bridge, and it's at that point that 9S begins to actively help with the search for the little sister, because at that point he had not told his pod to begin to look for the signal. And that's when he does say, hey, go look. He says, begin searching for the signal. And it's right after that that they are pretty much able to find the sister.
All right, so there's that gap in between. So after they find the first, the memorial to the king, and with they find the first memory circuit. They're walking by and they're seeing just the essentially, like standing guards, or like you'd see pseudo armor in a castle, but they're dead machines, just standing sentry, as you walk down the halls, and that's when they find the second memory chip, and that one's 128 years, and that is actually the memory of the king dying.
Right.
um, and so that's when they're like, our king has passed away, and that's when they decide to um, put the memory of the king into a newborn. So they actually, and they don't show it, but they just show like what looks like a crib or something like that, and a bunch of flowers. And then they mention like 4 years ago, another memory jump, uh, and then they show, yeah, this is the anniversary. It's time for us to put the memory into another young king. And then shortly after that is the as they walk across the bridge, and that's when it collapses. So yes, but Pascal does, after he saves 9S, he does then ask, um, or that's when you see, 9S decides to have a change of heart because he feels like he kind of owes him. And Pascal, being the nice person that he is, he's still like, how can I ever repay you? Not thinking that like, hey, you owe me one for saving you to begin with. Uh, yeah,
Right.
so he's just automatically still a giving person. But yeah, right after that is when they pretty much do find a signal.
Yeah, they managed to find the signal, and the little sister is is revealed, and she lets them know that she was helped by one of the inhabitants of the Forest Kingdom, who happens to be hiding with her, is still alive, and they decide to announce to everybody that they are going to be married. I don't think they used that word right away because they don't know the word. But Pascal's like, "Oh, you guys are gonna get married," and they're like, "Yeah, married. That's it." Um, and this is really confusing to 9S and 2B. They're like, "What are they? What like why?" Um, but they kind of have to just sort of go away from that because because the couple then asks to be a 9S to save the king, and to be still acting kind of cryptic, she agrees, and they tell her that the king is in the throne room, which is above them, and so she decides to try to go alone. She tells them to wait there while she goes up there. 9S follows after her. And so they go up there and they find the throne room and a crib in the center. And it has a machine baby in it. And it's at that moment that another android comes from above and kills the machine baby with a single sword strike through it. Um, it's the woman from the last few moments of the previous episode. So
Yeah, you see her dispatching, uh, you know, people in the woods, and so so it makes sense that that was a scene of her in this kingdom, fighting the inhabitants essentially. Because I made the joke that it looked like she was fighting Shovel Knight, and so
yeah,
that makes perfect sense that that's that's the current location, and it she from the last episode, I mentioned how she looked like 2B because she had the same beauty mark
Yeah.
on the chin, but she just has longer hair, and the pod instantly seems to recognize, identify the threat or this android. Um, and yeah, so I'll let you continue.
Yeah. Yeah. So um, after that, there is a small skirmish between the three androids and the the strange woman. They kind of fight her off, and she goes to leave. But before she does, 9S asks why she betrayed them, meaning why she betrayed the androids. Um, and
Because
she,
the pod pretty much stated that she's an enemy, and she's dispatched the previous groups looking for. So she's murdered a bunch androids who've come to hunt her down. So that's why he asked the question.
yeah, yeah. So with some anger, he asked that question, and before she leaves, she says, "Command is the one that betrayed," and then she takes off, and they go look for her, but they can't find her, and then that's the end of the episode. Um, yeah, so we kind of get a little bit more of of that of that main story going on, um, and yeah, so we're kind of left with, I think, about as many questions, maybe more questions than answers, still. Yeah, it's getting there very slowly. I kind of know what's coming. I think you've probably this is probably past the point where you've played in the game.
Oh, we've been past that for a long time.
I figured, but
I only know one other spoiler coming up ahead. That's but only because unfortunately that was just spoken out loud while I was watching something else, a different podcast, like years and years ago. And then it's one of those things that I heard it and I'm like, oh great, I can't unhear that forever.
you're never
So
gonna unhear that. Yeah. So
yeah.
there's definitely stuff that's gonna be coming up. So yeah, we're kind of just left in limbo on a lot of this, a lot of setup in this episode. Well, let's go ahead and go over to the puppet show. I will say that I think there's a little bit of spoilers in the puppet show. So if you want to avoid that, then maybe skip ahead a bit. We'll probably talk a little bit more about the our thoughts on the episode in general after that. But anyway, so the puppet show, the epilogue, as it were, is Pascal teaching the children and Emile, the head of Emile, about the day-night cycles. And he starts talking about the day, and they're like, "Oh, yay, day," and he starts talk about the night, and they're like, "Oh, scary night." And then I didn't understand this part at first, but until I was writing the summary for this, and I was like, "Oh, okay, I think I know what that is." So right before something happens, he's talking about the night cycles, and talks about a time, and about that being a time when a dragon flies through the skies, and it's at that point that that A2, which is the name of the woman, that A2 comes down and kills him with a single sword strike through the head, and it's pretty funny looking puppet, and then that's like where it ends, saying that his village, that Pascal's village inhabitants go crazy and kill all the androids. So it just makes no sense, but it's whatever, man. But anyway, so the thing that I figured out was the dragon that flies through the skies. I think that is a nod at Drakengard. Uh,
Yeah. The translation that I was reading for this was they're talking about the kingdom of day and the kingdom of night, and
okay.
explaining how their land never gets dark. Um, and so that's why it's always sunny out. And then that's when they're talking about the dark kingdom, and then talking about, and that's when he quickly mentions the dragon that flies through the sky in the dark kingdom as he gets stabbed. So
Yeah.
yeah, and I believe you're right. I believe it's a nod to Drakengard because that would make the most sense.
Yeah, I was like, what in the world is he talking about? And I was like, oh, yeah, of course, Drakengard. Yeah, so that's kind of the long and the short of what happens there at the end the puppet show. So yeah, it's a weird one. Yeah. Okay. Overall, what did you think of the episode as a whole?
I mean, it seemed kind of disjointed is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
I mean, we have here some forced comedy, people, a little out of place because usually your most of these comic relief bits would be from 9S, but you got, you got that operator 60 coming in, speaking a little bit weird, and then you got the tantrum that the big sister, does, and a lot of bowing because at first she bows and smashes her head to the ground, and later on, when the groom, fiance bot or life form, asks for them to save the king, he also bows, hands and forehead to the ground. So it's like, all right, this it just seems, I don't know, it was just very disjointed, and the fact that the little sister says, "I found the like I want to be with this person, and I want to." They are they're just as important to me as my sister, and I'm like, okay, did you just meet them? Did they just save your life? And then bam, you're like, yep, we're now gonna get hit because
Yeah.
it was kind of a little odd there, and they never quite explain the process of giving the king's memories to the a young child each time. So it was, you don't quite understand the fact that uh, does this machine life form, because you can change all the parts. Does the machine life form start out as an infant, and then as it develops a brain, like an AI, do they start upgrading a body for it, and then progress to an adult sized body, uh, and then proceed to take that king's memory yet again to another young life, machine life form? I mean, it was just all very odd. And as far as A2 goes, you know, quickly dispatching the young king without a second thought. Very much kind of how 9S slayed uh, the parent child at the end of the uh, carnival, or was it the circus episode for episode,
Yeah,
was it
the
3 or 4?
amusement park. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's just very much like, this is my job, this is what I'm doing, and so I was like, yeah, it just felt really like just disjointed everywhere. It
Yeah,
wasn't really that
they're
coherent.
they're continuing to try to that the way that modern anime. I mean, really, it's the way it's always been, as far as I can tell. For every show that I've seen in every era, is you've got to have a basically a enclosed story within an episode. They want you to get a beginning, a middle, and an end out of this episode, and a lot of TV and stuff works that way too. But this kind of story, since it was told in a video game over the course of like 40 hours, um, it has a lot more room to breathe in a game. And in this, they are trying to entertain you, with basically in 5 minute chunks. And I kind of wish that they wouldn't, that they would let it be like a 3 episode arc to do one of these things or another one of these things. But I think that they just know how many episodes that they're going to get, and then know that they're not going to get any more, or they're very unlikely to get any more. So they're just trying to get the show finished, with all the story they have to tell. And they're and I can tell that they're infusing more, because there's a lot of stuff in this show that's not in the game, but kind of the game could have used it. It really could have, some of the outside stuff that ended up being canon. It became canon for a reason, because it was like, okay, this is actually kind of important. Probably in hindsight, Yoko Taro realized that, this stuff is kind of needs to be in somewhere. But yeah, it's just kind of the nature of the beast, I think, and I'm just hoping that by the end of it, we'll have a little bit more satisfaction. Maybe toward the latter half, they'll be able to kind of stop with these vignettes and little things that we don't really care about, and get to like the main story and really start kind of hitting that. Not so many, you know, X-Files type, you know, monster of the week sort of things. But, you know, I think it's okay still. It's still probably it's still one of my favorite shows for this season of anime. I'm still enjoying it. But yeah, still that old problem with being a little bit all over the place.
Yeah, the like I said, the episode of it wasn't by far wasn't one of its stronger ones, but it's one of those necessary evils because you can't really have the introduction to A2 without having this episode, I feel.
Yeah.
And you are trying to show a little bit more you're trying to show that the characters are at least questioning, command, or at least 9S is finding things suspicious. 2B does agree that things seem odd. Uh, they're uh, so this was an episode you kind of had to go through at least
Yeah.
to show, show
And
this new person.
I kind of feel like we're getting a little bit too much of um 9S and 2B, you know, overcoming their programming very slowly. Like we're getting a little bit too much of that in every episode. I would prefer it to be something like it happens one time in episode 1, and then it happens one time in episode 4, and then it happens one time in episode 7. I would much prefer that where it's not like every episode, one little thing, you know, because it just kind of is like, well, they're not really making it just kind of seems like they're just sort of rehashing the same thing instead of making it feel like they're making progress towards something, which we know that they are, which that's where they're going. But it's just like, all right, how many times are you going to show us this before we actually have a massive breakthrough? I think probably, you know, 3 times across, you know, 10 episodes before you have a massive breakthrough or a change or whatever they're going for. That would be what I would prefer. But, you know,
Yeah, there's debates to both sides of that. I mean, it's one of those things that's like, um, you'd almost be, depending on how big the personality changes afterwards, you're like, wait, you just needed one time, one big like thing to realize, wait a minute, we might be the bad guys, or in this case, it's like, hey, you've seen it and it's constantly it's that drip feed, right? It's just like a little bit at a time, and eventually, like, oh wow, the realization or like the final, it's a little push, right? It's like it doesn't have to be like hitting the head with a sledgehammer, but it just has to be enough of a spark to like be like, oh wow, okay, everything falls in place, and you kind of see it building. I'm like, I can see both sides of the argument. But I feel that they made 9S way too skeptical from the start. So I just feel like they had a mind wiped him like Men in Black style from the beginning because
yeah.
they're like, yeah, they do updates, right? I assume they give in reports and given they save their memory backups, and command surely would know, be like, hey, this person's showing odd parameters, like they're showing too much independence. Let's fry him and reset him from an earlier state. Um, I just feel like that's what they would do. And granted, 2B has been very much quietly like anti Big Brother from the start but she's like, I'm just going to keep quiet about it and then just deal with it on my own. That's what I felt from the very beginning because the moment she's like, yeah, she's happy to see 9S, and 9S is like, hey, I don't remember anything. She's like kind of upset and bummed right off the start. So
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
yeah.
And that, you know, you kind of maybe remember that whenever they run into Pascal at the beginning of the episode, you know, you know, for a moment there, I was like, do they remember who this person is? Because they kind of acted like sort of annoyed by them, sort of like they said, like, oh, look at those two androids, or sorry, look at those two machines. They're acting strangely. Oh, it's a trap. And it's like, you know that this is Pascal. Like, you've been to their village. So it made me,
Yeah, but 9S is still skeptical. He doesn't trust them fully because he doesn't think that they're still the enemy. He still cannot bite that bullet. He's like, no way. He does not want to open them with open arms because he is programmed, and everything he's ever been taught from the day one is these are the enemies. They always try to kill you. You have to kill
I
them.
agree with all
Uh,
that, but 2B was also acting strangely. She wasn't like, oh yeah, like that's those people that we know from before. they're cool. She was like, they are acting like they are acting strangely. It's like, yeah, they're weird machines. I guess I kind of was like, well, is this some sort of weird, you know, flashback to one of the times before they got reset or something, and they're just acting that way? But I think it's just like you said, that they are just programmed to act this way toward machines, and it's impossible for them at
Well,
this point
for what
to
it's worth, if
be
you started
different.
running around screaming like your hair's on fire, I'd be like, "Yep, Nick's acting pretty weird." I mean, like granted, I wouldn't say
That's
it's a trap, but 9S was the one who's saying it's a trap. 2B's just like, "Yep, they're acting weird."
yeah.
So that's the way I looked at
I
it.
guess I'm probably overreading into it or whatever. I just felt like the translation, and maybe that's the issue. But I was just like, that's like, but why would they be acting like that? But I think
I
it
think
just,
it's 9S just constantly being skeptical, and it
yeah,
is. I mean, granted, it's better to be. It's like, well, if you were in enemy territory, then all of a sudden the enemy was like, "Yeah, we're friends," and you're like, I guess you'd be skeptical too.
yeah.
Um,
I'll
so
just chalk it up
that's
to that, I guess. But yeah, I mean, overall, not as strong an episode as the one before. I like Lily as a character, and I like everything that kind of that she went through and showed us. But overall, it was okay. Looking forward to more. I think Adam and Eve are going to be coming up here again fairly soon in a big way. So I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, pretty good.
for sure. I mean, yeah, it's hopefully we'll see. It feels like the story is actually really going to start to move,
It's
which is good.
it is yeah.
Hopefully a little less vignettes and a little more actual plot. But yeah, other than that, it's obviously I'm still going with it.
You're still
But
here.
yeah, this is one of the weaker episodes in my opinion. So that's it's unfortunate, but you can't they can't all be bangers, right? So
Can't all be bangers. Yeah. All right. Well, that's gonna do it for us here. Thanks for sticking with us and hanging out. We will see you next time.
all right, take it easy, guys.
Bye.